excited down there?
I'm stoked, man. I kind of got goosebumps. It's been so long.
Right? I'm excited to check back out today.
Emily wasn't meant to dive again. The season had officially ended, permits were running out, and winter storms were already stacking up along the horizon. The Eroica's pumps were struggling to hold pressure, and the crew was eager to start packing down equipment for the cold months ahead. But Emily couldn't shake a gut feeling. A quiet, persistent tug that something about yesterday's sonar readings didn't sit right. At around 80 feet deep, the scan had shown a solid, even surface, not the scattered echo of pay dirt, but a clean, deliberate line. The sonar tech dismissed it, said it was probably just bedrock. Emily stared at the data twice, then shook her head. Something was off. Finally, she spoke the words that split her team right down the middle. "We're going back out." The crew protested. The dredge frame was warped, the pumps were overheating, and the sea was turning mean. But Emily had already marked the coordinates, a lonely grid point on the edge of their claim called Point Delta. She personally keyed the location into the navigation console and ordered the deckhands to ready the suction lines for one last pass. No one argued after that. They just got dressed. By the time the tide opened mid-afternoon, the ocean had gone still enough to work. Emily stepped off the side and disappeared beneath the surface. The descent was brutal. Almost no visibility, a cold gray fog swirling in the water. She kept her breathing steady and relied on the handheld sonar to guide her. Then the trench came into view, a long scar stretching east to west, layered with fine silt and broken stone. She swept the sonar once, twice, and froze. The tone shifted, sharp, metallic feedback. Emily steadied her hand and scanned again. The shape on her display was too straight, too perfect to be natural. A rectangular block buried deep beneath the gravel. She reached down, fingers brushing the edge of something smooth, unnaturally cold. As she wiped away the sand, a faint glint flashed under her light. That wasn't rock. Emily dropped a weighted marker and surfaced, her voice level but clipped as she reported the find. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. They'd been expecting leftover black sand or trace gold, not whatever this was. Still, Emily gave the order. "Run suction, low speed. Stay on my marker." The hoses started to hum, rattling with gravel and debris, but what filled the silt box wasn't pay dirt. When they pulled it aboard, the crew went silent. A thick metal plate, roughly hewn, corners rounded by corrosion. Emily crouched beside it. Across its surface ran shallow impressions, faded letters, stamped markings that looked official, not industrial. She scraped away the crusted grime, and beneath it a dull golden shimmer emerged. Not bright, but heavy, aged, alloyed. The test came back almost pure, 98%, mid-1800s minting composition. Along one edge, faint Latin letters glimmered through the oxidation. The crew stared. Latin. On gold, buried beneath the gnome seafloor. Someone asked if it could be from a wreck. Emily didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the dredge readings. Another ping, then another, each only a few feet apart. A pattern was taking shape, too organized to be chance. She spoke quietly. "Hold the hose steady. Strip the upper layer only. Don't widen the field." Bit by bit, the suction cleared the gravel. Underneath, a massive outline began to appear, not scattered debris, but a structure. Wood blackened by time, held together by iron bands that still clung like ribs. Whatever it wasn't driftwood, and it definitely wasn't modern. This thing had been built to last, and it had been waiting there for decades. Emily ordered the crane repositioned. The sonar showed it was heavier than expected, dense with uniform layers inside. The density pattern screamed a single word in her mind. Bars. Not flakes, not nuggets. Bars. She didn't celebrate. She just said, "Bring it up, slow." The winch strained as the structure tore free from the seafloor, silt rising around it like smoke. Halfway up, a corner snapped, corrosion giving way after decades underwater. A dull metallic clatter rang out across the deck. Gold bars, fused together by salt and time, spilled onto the planks, gleaming beneath the gray daylight. The nearest deckhand didn't even move. Emily picked one up. She brushed the grit away and turned it toward the light. Etched across the face, half worn but still legible, were the words, U.S. Army Transport, 1942. She froze. That wasn't local treasure. That was government gold. Wartime issue. Setting it down carefully, she called for the camera. Every bar had matching serials, stamped and orderly. She logged them all in silence before shutting down the dredge and sealing the site. The ocean around them rolled calm and gray, whatever they had just uncovered. It wasn't just history. It was a secret the sea had been holding for over 80 years. Ingots, each stamped with bold black lettering. Federal Reserve, San Francisco. Back inside the cabin, Emily powered up her tablet, fingers trembling slightly as she accessed the military archives. One by one, she entered the serial numbers etched on the recovered bars. The connection lagged for a few seconds. Then a match appeared. The numbers weren't random. They belonged to a manifest dated 1942. Operation Cindervault. It was a classified wartime shipment. Federal gold reserves relocated north for secure transfer through Anchorage. According to the record, the transport vessel, the Aurora's Hope, had disappeared en route. No distress call, no wreckage, no trace, just listed as missing at sea. And the coordinates of its final signal? Almost identical to the trench they'd been dredging, Point Delta. That realization hit hard. Emily wasn't chasing remnants of an old pay streak anymore. She was sitting on top of a vanished military transport loaded with wartime bullion. The weight of it all settled in instantly. Lost federal property, military jurisdiction, maybe even foreign interest if shared reserves were involved. Emily said nothing to the crew. She simply told them, "We're back at it at first light." Same site, same setup. No one protested this time. The silence in the cabin was heavy, the kind that follows the moment everyone realizes they've crossed a line they can't step back from. By dawn, ice had sealed the inlet again. The crew thawed the surface with heating coils before lowering Emily into the water. This time she descended with reinforced lines, upgraded pressure sensors, and the quiet understanding that what she was diving into wasn't just a claim. It was history. The trench ran deeper than before, darker too. The sonar came alive with a scatter of metallic returns across nearly 40 meters of seafloor. Jagged rods, bent plates, shattered beams. Each piece pointed to one chilling truth. A shipwreck. Emily steadied herself against a ridge, sweeping her light slowly through the gloom. Bronze fittings flashed beneath layers of silt, unmistakably naval, marine grade. Not debris, not mining scrap. This was structure, deliberate and engineered. She followed the curvature of what looked like a collapsed hull, its frame crushed under decades of pressure. Inside one section, where the plating had caved inward, rows of metal containers were wedged tight beneath the wreckage. Each one identical, rectangular, reinforced, sealed. Their symmetry defied nature. They hadn't rolled or drifted. They were still in formation, untouched since the day the ship went down. Emily tapped one gently with her tool. The hollow metallic echo rang through the water. Her pressure gauge spiked. The compartment still held air. Sealed tight for over 80 years. She pressed a locator beacon to the hull, syncing its frequency to the base. Then she ran one final sonar sweep. The outline stretched beyond visibility. A buried arc curving west, deeper into the trench. If the crate they'd found on deck came from this site, this wasn't just wreckage. It was the vault. A flicker of gold caught her light, a narrow gleam peeking through a fractured beam. Proof that what they'd uncovered so far was only the beginning. Emily rose slowly, breaking the surface in a burst of cold spray. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "We found the ship." No one replied. The inlet around them groaned under the shifting ice. Every man on deck understood what that meant. This wasn't about lost treasure anymore. It was a sealed wartime vault, buried in the dark for generations. And they had just opened the first door. By sunrise, Emily was back at it. The dredge locked into position, cutting through refrozen layers. She clipped into the forward tether, adjusted her gear, and descended once more, this time armed with hydraulic cutters, reinforced oxygen, and the unshakable knowledge that what waited below had survived 8 decades for this moment. Her target was the sealed chamber beneath the fractured beam, the same section that had triggered abnormal pressure readings on her last dive. Visibility was almost non-existent, a gray fog of drifting silt. Emily steadied the hydraulic cutter against the corroded wall and triggered the ignition. A burst of bubbles tore upward, followed by a swirl of debris. The vault's outer skin was finally starting to give. The metal surrendered faster than she expected. When the seam cracked open, a shimmering cloud burst from the gap, fine particles of gold dust spiraling through her flashlight's beam like sparks underwater. The compartment wasn't empty. It was packed solid, stacked rows untouched since the 1940s. She pushed through the narrow opening and froze. Inside were neat, perfect rows of lifted one carefully. Even through her gloves, the dense weight told her everything she needed to know. Pure bullion. Pre-war issue. Refined before production, had shifted to military alloys. Emily logged the coordinates, recorded video, and noted her readings. Over 3,000 pounds estimated in just this chamber. It wasn't cargo storage. It was a vault. Then came the sound. A low groan vibrated through the hull. Decades of corrosion were finally catching up. The pressure shift from the breach had destabilized the trench walls. The bulkhead trembled. Above her, something gave way with a sharp metallic crack. Emily yanked her tether, signaling an emergency haul. The winch above screamed as the surface team pulled hard. Behind her, the collapse chased upward, a roar of silt and fragments swirling like a storm. When she broke the surface, the crane swung her aboard, water streaming from her suit. Gold dust glittered across both gloves. No one spoke. The deck was already half covered in recovered bullion from earlier lifts, some fused together in rough clusters, others perfectly cast and gleaming. Each weighed close to 40 pounds, every marking matched. The crew began tests. The onboard spectrometer lit up with readings, purity exceeding 99%. The alloy contained wartime stabilizers, microscopic traces used to prevent oxidation during long sea transport. Whoever packed these bars expected them to survive anything. Emily took charge of cataloging. She tagged each sample, comparing serial patterns, and the numbers aligned perfectly with the crate from their first discovery. All part of one shipment, one purpose, one story. But the smaller box recovered from the chamber told a deeper one. It wasn't bullion. Inside were mixed artifacts, rings, insignias, medallions. Velvet linings had long disintegrated, leaving a scatter of relics still intact. Each piece bore twin crests, the American eagle on one face and the double-headed emblem of pre-Soviet Russia on the other. Not medals, not awards, emblems of alliance. Early war diplomatic gifts, perhaps. Symbols from a brief moment when the two nations had trusted each other. It hit her then. This wasn't just a lost treasure haul. It was a missing diplomatic consignment, an unrecorded gold exchange meant to stabilize joint reserves before the war turned cold. She documented everything, weights, photos, metal readings, aware that what she had uncovered could rewrite part of wartime financial history. Outside, the storm built again, driving shards of ice across the inlet. Still, they stayed anchored. None of them could sleep. At dawn, before Emily could ready her next descent, a sharp transmission crackled over the radio. Coast Guard aircraft inbound, requesting coordinates and cargo status. Within hours, a cutter appeared on the horizon, cutting straight toward them through the fog. The crew traded anxious looks. Nobody had reported the find. Someone else had. When the vessel drew alongside, uniformed officers boarded immediately. Their tone was official, cold, and precise, citing maritime salvage law and national security protocols. They demanded immediate custody of the recovered material. Emily handed over her data logs. Their attention never left the gold. Each bar was photographed, tagged, and sealed in numbered containers. They cross-checked the serials against a classified list none of the crew were allowed to see. Moments later, a helicopter descended. 2 men in dark suits stepping out, not Coast Guard, not local. They conferred briefly with the commander, then ordered the cargo labeled restricted. Within hours, every piece, the bullion, artifacts, even sediment samples, was packed and lifted away. When Emily requested documentation, the reply was curt. This operation falls under national security review. You'll receive notice through official channels one by one. Each crew member was questioned on deck, warned not to discuss the recovery until ownership was legally resolved. The dredge's black box was taken. System logs were copied. Even their communication link to Nome Harbor was cut. Within minutes, Point Delta was declared a restricted zone. By sunset, the cutter was gone, taking every ounce of gold with it. No record of seizure, no receipt, nothing but the faint glitter of dust on Emily's gloves and the empty imprint of bars once stacked on the deck. That night, she wrote a single line in her private journal. The vault is still down there. What they took wasn't everything. Within just a few days, Emily began hearing whispers, not directly, but through the quiet channels of people who still worked the waters near Nome. Experienced divers mentioned seeing military submersibles prowling the inlet at night, moving silently toward the very coordinates she had marked at Point Delta. Fishermen spoke of floodlights slicing through the frozen mist, engines rumbling far from any registered dock. The rumors grew quickly. Small towns thrive on secrets, and this one had the weight of gold behind it. Then an old colleague of Emily's, a sonar technician now freelancing on coastal mapping projects, reached out. His message came encrypted. Along with it, he sent her sonar scans, clearly pulled from the same trench the government had claimed was closed off. Officially, there was no ongoing operation. Unofficially, the data told a very different story. The trench was still active, and Point Delta wasn't finished giving up its secrets. Emily opened the files immediately. The sonar grids displayed clear anomalies, 3 distinct metallic zones beneath the main wreck, each buried deeper than the hull she had explored. The readings were tight, dense, consistent with gold mass. One of them matched the density pattern of Federal Reserve bullion exactly. The others looked like fragmented cargo, maybe broken containers or pieces of the ship's lower frame. But one thing was certain. What the government had taken wasn't everything. By now, access to the site had been locked down. The Coast Guard issued public notices forbidding all civilian craft within a mile of Point Delta. Any new dive required federal clearance. The treasure had been sealed away, by law, if not by nature. But Emily wasn't done. She knew that without proof, hard, scientific evidence, her discovery would vanish behind classified walls. So she turned her focus to what she still had, the materials already in her possession. She hired a private metallurgy lab, anonymous and out of state, to run a full analysis on the residue from her dredge lines and silt traps. Her instructions were exact: isolate metallic traces and confirm elemental composition. When the report came back a week later, it told her what she'd hoped and feared. The sediment held microscopic flecks of gold, chemically identical to mid-20th century Federal Reserve bullion. It verified that the bars she'd recovered were authentic, and more importantly, that the dredge had barely scratched the surface of a much larger deposit. The report also revealed something else: traces of bronze alloy matching the composition of naval hull fittings and container reinforcements. In short, the wreck beneath Point Delta was deeper, broader, and better preserved than anyone had realized. Cross-referencing the new findings with her archived sonar data, Emily reached a stark conclusion. Less than half of the original cargo had been lifted before the federal intervention. The rest still sat untouched beneath layers of silt, ice, and seawater. The readings hinted at sealed crates, still intact, holding several thousand pounds of bullion and diplomatic artifacts. Her calculations showed the remaining cargo could easily exceed the recovered $90 million, perhaps double that. But there was more. The data suggested that when the Aurora's Hope sank, the ship had fractured upon impact. The hold didn't collapse as a single unit. It fragmented, scattering its contents along a curved trench line. Using historical maps, old dredge logs, and the new sonar scans, Emily traced a distinct arc of debris, marking where the main vault likely split apart before burial. The government, she realized, had only recovered the topmost layer, the easy part. The deeper sections remained insulated under time and pressure. In the following weeks, more whispers reached her inbox. Divers still working near the inlet described faint sonar echoes, hollow shapes too geometric to be natural. Some claimed to see metallic flashes glinting under the ice when the floodlights hit at the right angle. Beneath the ice, under the silent weight of decades, the legacy of the Aurora's Hope endures. Its gold, its history, and its mystery, sleeping in the deep, cold dark of Point Delta,